Empower who?
Empower me.
But like thinking about the audience, thinking about who you're speaking to, thinking about who's speaking to you, it's a youth, it's a young person that they don't know how to process it, but they're just telling you, right? They're sharing with you. There's this, that's their way of saying, this is the help that I need, without being able to say it in a intentional, very direct way. It's just, I'm telling you what happened. And so to answer with, how are we going to move forward? How are you going to move on? I have heard so many, like, let's bury this. Let's have this,
Right.
let's have this event that you're burying it, you're letting it go. And it's like, yeah, no, like one conversation is not going to make all that go away. Now, it may make it suppress it because what I have heard you, what I have gotten out of this conversation is that you don't really care. You're just like, look, how can we move on from this? Because this is making my job harder.
Mm-hmm. It's like, I think people seen that in a movie one time, and it was like, oh my gosh, this was the amazing thing that I've ever seen, and we have to use this for all of our kids. Like, that does not work. Like,
it's invalidating. It's like, you're on to the next, and hopefully you burying this makes my job easier. So
yeah, it's like those movies where a white teacher moves into a needy neighborhood and somehow fixes everything. Like, come on.
Yes.
That's a whole nother conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, well.
Yeah.
That's what it brought up in my head, and I'm like, I would see those movies and I'd immediately walk away. I'd be like, this is
yeah. Like, I refuse to spend my money on that.
Just stop there.
So we still haven't gotten out of this part yet, but I still have. So when you came in there, did they immediately start trying? Because you talked about being put on medication, and obviously they didn't do enough of the forework to be like they didn't ask you the right questions to even know whether you needed medication or you just needed somebody to talk to, or whatever. So what do you remember, what type of medication you were put on and how quickly they put you on medications, and did the medications work? I don't know.
So crazy enough, I came into care already on medication. So understanding that, like, and I think I mentioned it briefly, I had two instances where I ended up at a psychiatric hospital. And the second one being right before I went into foster care, right? So the first, I was still with my family, and that was probably 2 years before I came into care. And so I had been on medication since I was 10. Now, I can't for the life of me remember the name. It was important for me to mention it, but it was an A. But I only wanted to mention it because I found out later, like as I got older and understood medication and blah blah blah, that literally the commercials say don't give to anyone under 18, but I was 10. So it wasn't something that like was new to me. I want to say that's when I came into care, I stayed on that medication and they added like 2 more. And it was all supposed to be for depression. They're like antidepressants and like mood stabilizers or whatever. And I was one of those kids in care that experienced being wrongfully diagnosed multiple times and over medicated. And that is obviously due to not trying to understand the root of the problem, but how can we control to make sure that she can remain in a placement. So I guess by the time I was like 15, I was on like 5 different medications. And so it's funny because I would go and you just asked me, how did you feel? Do you think it made a difference? For the longest, I honestly was like, I don't know. I've been on medication since I was 10. I don't remember what I'm like off of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it just felt like every placement I went to, there was always something new. I went to placements where like I would get sick. And if I complained about it, it was like, she has an issue. And the next day I was at the therapist getting put on new medication. No lie, y'all, that happened. Like I had one night, was in this group home, and in the group home there were like, it was co-ed, but the boys stayed over here, girls stayed over there, and each room had like a speaker. And so like then the house parent that stayed in their room, they had like control of all the speakers and could talk to you from their room in the speaker or whatever. And I just remember one night I was really sick. I ended up having strep throat, but I couldn't go to sleep, and so I was like calling out on the speaker, and to her, I guess because she couldn't go to sleep, she complained that I couldn't sleep, and that I was being disruptive and was waking up everybody else. And I really was just like, hey, do y'all have any medication? Because I can barely swallow. I got strep throat. And I remember going to the next time I had my therapy visit, I guess my psychiatry visit, because technically a therapist doesn't prescribe medication. I was put on another medication, and then found out by the time when I was like 17, 18. So that was like 15. When I was like 17, 18, found out that that medication was actually more of I was told it was like an antidepressant, but it was actually more of like a sleeping pill. And so some of its properties, I guess, showed that it supported depression, but it was used more for helping you to sleep. And I found out only at 17, 18, because I went to a therapist, get this, that a psychiatrist that wasn't in any way connected to foster care. Because at that time I was at my second adopted home, and this was in a whole nother state. This was in Jacksonville, Florida. And so, I was going to like doctors outside of like foster care connection. DFACS has their therapists. Each placement has their therapist. And so I was finally going to see a therapist and a psychiatrist outside of that. And she was like, yeah, no, this is like more so used as a sleep agent. You've been on it for like 4 years. Yeah. And I told her, I remembered exactly when I got put on it. And pretty much at that time, I was 17. It was like, what have you been diagnosed with? This, that, this, and this. And she was like, I don't see that. Like, I just see like, you've been through a lot and you're only 17. And so she weaned me off of everything. By the time I got to her, I was like on 6 different medications. She weaned me off of everything, knowing that I had that one like sleeping pill. I had to like, it was like, once you get off of this, you're not going to be able to sleep. So I had to start taking like natural supplements, like melatonin gummies and stuff like that to get back to a sleeping pattern. But ultimately she was just like, I can understand why you're depressed, but I don't think that you are bipolar or that you have a mood disorder or none of that. But it was, I never questioned it. And I remember after this, to be honest, I ultimately in the second adoption got off of everything. So, you got to wean you off of stuff. You can't just take it off. But for years I had remember just saying, I don't know what I'm like off of medication. No idea. I went through like the stages of either I was on medication and I was hyper, or I was on medication and I had no personality at all, or I was on medication and I was always tired. I remember a phase during that time where I was in like 10th grade and I had my medication switched more recently at a new school. And like one of my teachers said I fell asleep during class and like was literally banging on the table next to my head, and I would not wake up. Like had to call the nurse, call the principal. They came in, and it was just like instead of DFACS being alarmed by being called about it, they were like, all right, let's switch your medication because maybe that just wasn't the right one. So I've had a lot of experiences, ultimately got weaned off of all of them. And at 17, for the first time in 7 years, got to experience me without medication. And I thought I was a pretty cool person.
You are a pretty cool person. I don't know. That's just deep when you said that, like you got to experience you for the first time at 17. Yeah. And what was that? What was that first night of sleep like?
I don't remember. I remember taking the melatonin. I guess I went to sleep. I do know it took me a while. Huh?
That means it was good if you don't remember.
I have always had issues with sleep. So even now, every now and then I have to take melatonin, but I've always had issues with this. I don't know. Like, I think I mean, I've gotten some sleep.
And did you have anybody to? I guess not. Nobody would talk to you about that, like, or look at your files like, why is this kid on all these different medications? Like, I think everybody.
No, you know what? Unfortunately, and I think things have changed because that was a part of my advocacy focus when I was younger. I think things have changed a little bit, but unfortunately, that was common. It was normal. I think that someone that wasn't so close to like case management and working directly with kids may have seen it and would be like, what? That's a lot of medication. But for the most part, it was normal. I remember like my second adoption ending and I had to come back to Georgia, and my caseworker picks me up from the airport. And instead of like asking me what happened and wanting what happened again, and wanting to hear from me, she didn't ask me. The first thing, literally, when I got in the car with her, she was like, I know you just got off all that medication, but you probably should consider getting back on something because the adoption failed. So instead of asking me what happened, like, what's going on? How are you feeling? What do you want? Like, you were supposed to be adopted and now you're coming back at 18, just graduating high school, and you don't have anybody here. It was like, you might want to consider getting put back on medication. You're on mute.
I know. I put myself on mute so I don't say a curse word out loud.
We appreciate that.
I don't get it. Like, who vets these people?
You know,
who mentors during that time?
You know, my case manager that I had for years, she's still a case manager.
Are those I guess your original adoptive parents, are they still adopting?
No, as far as I know, I don't think so. I have no idea. They ended up getting rid of their last adopted kid, but they didn't put them in foster care. They signed guardianship over to somebody else, which was my sister. And she ended up finding me a few years after they just stopped talking to her. But no, I don't think so. I think that we don't talk. We haven't talked since I've run into them like once or twice, ran into my mom twice. So she actually, ironically, started doing this type of work. So she, like, right after I came into foster care, she opened a group home type transition home for young girls that have been neglected and abused. And she became like a martyr in the nonprofit world of supporting children and youth and women. And it's become her thing. It's her. Yeah. So I don't think they adopted, but I do think that, yeah, I don't know.
We can't have like a whole group home full of kids going through this. Like,
that's not funny, Anthony. So don't say that.
I mean, that's legit what it is. Like, we can't have a whole group home full of kids going through this like that. I can't.
You know what's so crazy is like I've been fortunate enough to by this much not run into her. And because I have stayed in this work as an advocate, you know, working for MAC, and I've stayed in the line of work of child welfare. And I've come this close at least 2 or 3 times to crossing paths. And I remember, I don't know if you remember this, I remember when I was in empowerment as an advocate, Empowerment works with a program that I found out that she partnered with. And I have received so much support and so much like love from Empowerment when I found out, and it was just really shocking. And I think it was the first time that like Sarah Bess and you had seen that kind of emotion from me. And I just remember, like, so I'm saying like I was that close, but I remember when people would ask me about it, it was always like, I haven't talked to her in 10 years. And so who am I to say that she hasn't changed or she isn't doing something good for this community? And although I know my story and I know what happened behind closed doors, who am I to break that? I don't know if that makes any sense, but
You're the victim.
yeah, but people change, people learn, people grow, and she was doing good work. People love her.
But even like there's just I'm not combating anything that you're saying. That's just the conversation part. But even you said that that she was all about appearances.
Yeah.
So regardless, like she was probably looking really well to everybody that she was going out and talking to while you were locked in the bathroom not eating at that point in time.
Oh yeah. And anyone that I got close to or anyone that I tried to reach out to, she destroyed. Like yeah, it's I have reconnected with people who are like, she tried to get me fired from my job. She tried to get me to, like, we went to court. So, I mean, again, I am not here to tear anybody down. My story is my story, but I just, it was never my job. It's not my job to make sure that the work that she is doing that has created some change, whether she was directly involved or not, her name was on it. I just never felt like it was my responsibility to tell everybody she's not a good person or this was the experience. And maybe that's me being too open and too caring and too forgiving to a fault. But again, as I stated at the beginning of the video of this interview, it's, I don't even think she realized that a lot of the issues probably stemmed from her own trauma and her own lack of understanding of what, how she was recreating her trauma and with me. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I'm done talking about that. I don't have no,
Yeah, completely understandable.
Yeah, no, I understand your point, your like where you're coming from. I totally do. I think it's just that I'm a complete jerk. so I don't know.
The listeners and viewers, you heard him say that.
Everything doesn't deserve for me in my personal point of view and how I've come to accept things. Not everything deserves forgiveness or what have you. And I think that a lot of things like giving a kid up or abusing children like that doesn't necessarily deserve forgiveness or whatever. You can seek it, but I don't mean I have to forgive it.
Yeah. Now to not seem like, oh my gosh, she just has it together. I have not forgiven her. Because she is a big part of me healing from my trauma. So she's still there. It's like every chunk that I start working on, she's there. So I've not forgiven her. It's just, I just needed to put that out there because I feel like sometimes people can talk about like, I've forgiven and I've done this and I've done that. Yeah, no, I'm not at that point in my healing.
That's that box stuff that people talk about. Hey, put this in the box and say you forgive.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm more of a fan of St. Francis of Assisi's definition of forgiveness, which is merely letting go of that burden placed on your back. That it does not entail forgetfulness. It doesn't entail letting the other person back into your life. It's entail just letting go of that burden so that you can live more freely.
Yep. I completely agree. I'm not there yet, but yeah. Still got some heavy bricks I'm carrying.
All right. So after you came back from Florida, from the, I guess you say the pastor and the first lady, or the preacher and the first lady, what take us from there?
So pretty much all of that happened to end the adoption, like maybe 3 weeks before I was supposed to graduate from high school. And pretty much, fortunately, I was able to go live with her son for the remainder of that time, because what was going to happen was Defects was like, you got to come back. They're not adopting you. You got to come back to Georgia. Therefore, I would have had to sit out another year before I could graduate. But fortunately, I was able to stay with her. They went through all the like background checks and all that, and I was able to stay with her son. And I graduated, and no one came to my graduation. Just got to throw that one out there, because I have held that in for so long.
I didn't receive an invite.
I didn't know you. You didn't exist at that time. And so the day after graduation, I was put on a plane with like whatever I could carry, like a suitcase. The rest of my stuff had to be shipped, so I didn't have everything. But I graduated, because if I had a suitcase, that means I graduated a little bit. I didn't have like a plastic bag, a trash bag. But
Defect special.
Right. I got on a plane and I came back, and I remember my caseworker picked me up at the time. My caseworker at the time, she picked me up from the airport. And I remember her, the conversation honestly was, this was your last chance at getting adopted. Nobody wants to adopt it. Almost 18-year-old. We have no idea where you're going to go. But we'll figure it out. And in the meantime, I went to stay at this temporary foster home in Stockbridge, because really you got to think, so I was 17, hadn't turned 18 yet, wouldn't turn 18 till later in the year. And so didn't have any relationships or connections with anybody in Georgia. Like all the connections were like whatever foster home I was at the time, or group home. And there was only one person that I really wanted to see, that I knew we had kind of stayed in contact. So it was my boyfriend at the time, my high school sweetheart. And I just remember because she didn't ask me what happened. She was just, I felt blamed. She didn't directly blame me, but when you don't ask what happened, and she was obviously, because it was a big deal. So my legal county was Fayette County, very small. And so it was a big deal that at 17, she had gone through this adoption, 16, 17, she had gone through this adoption and was out of state. Awesome. And so it just felt like it was more of this, I thought we were going to have this huge check on our list of kids that have been adopted. This was a big deal. She was a teenager. And then now we have to erase that or cross that out. And there was no questions about what happened, or, how are you feeling? What's going on? It was like back to business, right? You're going to go back to the foster home. You know how this works. And so I remember going to this foster home, and they kept asking me what do you need? What do you need? And so as I've stated before, I was queen of suppressed feelings, very dry. I had a constant resting bitch face. And it was no one knew how I felt. It was just kind of this is life as I know it, y'all. So I remember going to this foster home. The lady was really sweet. And walked right in, said, hey, and walked right into the room. She told me it was going to be mine, closed the door, did not come out for 2 days. And she would come and knock on the door and ask me if I wanted food. And I was like, no. And I remember the second day, she was like, sweetie, you have to eat. You will, Defects is, going to come and you'll get in, probably get in trouble or something. So I remember she just was really sweet. She was, she had one other youth in foster care. It was a little girl. And when I came out and finally was all right, I'll talk, I'll kind of engage. She was just a really nice lady. And the only thing I wanted was to see him out, and really it was just because he was familiar. I wouldn't be a fast or nothing. He was just familiar. Okay. And so at the time, it was funny because this lady, this foster parent, didn't know me from left to right. I had only been there for 2 days, but in those 2 days, I will say that she was my caseworker didn't want me to see him. And she was just if he's the only person she wants to see, why are y'all making this so difficult?
Mm-hmm.
She doesn't have anybody else. She just had a failed adoption. Why are y'all making this so difficult? To the point where like I started opening up to her, and she advocated for me to stay with her. But my caseworker was just like, no, this was not the final placement. We've got to move her.
Like
and to me, that's crazy because there is a difference between I guess like if a foster parent is like, hey, I want to keep her, so she doesn't have to keep moving. She's about to be 18 anyways. But y'all fight against this so much. It was just crazy. I'm sorry, y'all. Hold on one second. Mommy duties.
No, that's fine. Like I understand it. Like that happened to my little brother. He had a great placement, and it was like he went from fighting every day at school to fighting every other day to fighting once a week. The foster parent knew the teacher. He went from a maybe kindergarten to like a second grade reading level, and because that wasn't his final placement, they upped and moved him. I didn't know about the law that I trained y'all on at that particular point in time, but had I known, it'd have been all types of hell.
Yeah, sorry about that, y'all.
No.
But yeah, so from there, actually, I guess, and I guess for her, she was like, you're going to be 18 soon. You're going to have to start preparing to age out of care. And at that time, I think we were, I don't know how it works now. Like, do you sign back in, or do you just not have to sign anything at all unless you're going to sign out?
Now, I say since you sign out at 21, you have to opt out, and there must be meetings before you can before that final paper is signed. Like you have to sign yourself out of care as opposed to signing yourself back in the care.
Back in care. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So at that time though, it was like I remember having like one or two conversations where my caseworker was like, "Are you going to stay in foster care?" Blah blah blah, trying to explain it. And I mean, where was I going to go?
Wait, before you finish that, my question is, did you have the same caseworker throughout your whole?
I did, which is so crazy because initially when I was in placement, like just different placements, she was in that. And then when I switched over to like adoption, she had switched over to adoption. And so I had the same caseworker up until that point. Now, because I wasn't getting adopted, she was the one that picked me up from the airport, but she let me know that, she wasn't going to be able to work with me further because I wasn't getting adopted anymore. But I will say that was always the positive, even in my advocacy work with empowerment, was I didn't have to experience multiple case managers.
I would have wanted another one. Like the one time that you want another one. Yeah.
Yeah, so I had the same one, yeah. Up until, I think at the time, honestly, at this time when I came back is when Chris 180 was opening their ILP program, their apartments. I don't know what it's called anymore, but yeah, and it was new. And so I remember her telling me, she was like, there's this program, it's like an independent living program, you'll get your own apartment, yada, yada, yada. Cool. I didn't know anything about that. I had gotten my first job at Wendy's and like when I was in Jacksonville and worked there for like 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. So I didn't know anything about like living on your own, having your own job, whatever, all the good stuff. So so I was placed there, and I want to say the rest is history, but and just like any new program, you're going to have a lot of changes at the beginning. And so I was there for a lot of the like, oh, this doesn't work, so let's change this. Oh, we need a new program director. Oh, and it was good. I will say that was my final placement up until I aged out of foster care. And it was good. It was good for me, mostly because it was independent. It did allow you to be independent. And I was, to a fault, very independent because I didn't trust people. Like, and I'm not even saying that in a bad way. It's just I didn't trust people. And so if I wanted something to happen, I was going to make it happen. And the only way it would happen is if I made it happen, And so I, when I got there, I didn't have a state ID. I didn't have anything. I didn't have my birth certificate. I didn't have my social security card. And that program, it was like you would get your life coach, they would support you through this. And because I'm not too open to new people, I did it all by myself. And so I think that it was kind of at that point, I was still in defects custody. And so from 18 to 21, I was kind of just riding the wave. And it wasn't necessarily a good wave. It was just more of like, it wasn't steady. It was just more of, I was, we're all in this field. So you have the kids, excuse me, that they need a little extra push, a little extra support, a little extra help. And we need to meet with them a little more frequently, but then you have the kids who, yeah, I can talk to you on the phone once a month, once every 2 months, and you're good because you're doing it, you're making it happen. And that's kind of how I was. I was still in defense custody, but I was like 19, 20 with a case manager that was like 21, 22. So I couldn't take her. She was a sweet lady, but I couldn't take her seriously because I'm like, girl, you just entering life like me. And I just remember she tried so hard to like really like, I want to help you. And I'm like, I get it. And and I'm like this hardcore, like, I don't know you, so I'm not going to tell you anything. But I remember finally talking to her and telling her that, like, look, because she was like, they put you on my caseload because you're one of the easier kids, and I'm new, so I'm like, but that's a thing, so and she would come and see me, and she tried her hardest to like, what do you need? I'm like, and I would tell her enough. So at that point I had learned that you got to get enough for them to note in your file. And so I would give enough. I never gave everything, but I would give enough to say, like, I'm working, I'm doing this. And in the interim, in that time of being at Chris, in their IOP program, I worked at DFACS, DeKalb County DFACS. I actually worked with the IOP program. So I kind of had a leg up to like everything that was available because I worked with the DeKalb County IOP at the time, and ended up there for like 3 years. And so I was just doing my thing. Then went to Year Up once that ended at the DeKalb IOP. And from Year Up, I got into corporate and kind of grew the skills that I have now. And then, came back into this field. But it was an adjustment. There was, and there were things that happened there. Obviously, it's not just me. So it's not like this was just like a perfect living situation. It's other kids that are in care, other kids that may need a little more help, other kids that, other youth that are, so I had my experiences, I had my issues and trauma that was created while I was there. But I will say I did get to a point where I was like, I was ready. Like, a lot of kids, you have to convince them to like stay, right? You're like, I know you want to be so done with them. I know you want to get out of this case, like not having to see a case manager. I know you want to like feel like you're on your own, but look, stay. Mm-hmm. This will help you in the long run. Do what you got to do. Give enough information. And that's kind of where I was. So I was ready to age out, but I also didn't know that aging out would create its own issues. It was almost like my life, my mental health was holding on to this bag of like, you got all this other trauma, but you ain't ready for this aging out trauma, right? And I just remember, and you helped me move too when I was like, when I aged out and I was ready to move, and I moved to this apartment downtown, and everybody was like, Mia, got it? What's going on? Okay.
I remember going down that long hallway, trying to put your couch in between.
But yeah, so it presented its own issues. It was like, I didn't realize how aging out of foster care would bring up this, would really heighten my feelings of loneliness and needing to feel like I belonged, and I didn't. Because once foster care was gone, at that time, it was just me.
And that's scary. Like that, I remember that feeling. That feeling is so scary.
Yeah.
Like it's like, oh my gosh, I've had all these people helping me
Exactly.
for so long, and now everybody's just poof gone. Like what?
Because but Anthony, what's crazy though is it wasn't even like I got an email from my caseworker supervisor that said good luck.
Oh,
Like there was no like not now granted, I didn't expect to have a party with balloons and stuff. I'm like, yay, you aged out. Maybe we should do that. But like I got an email that said like, wishing you all the best, good luck. I think that you're well prepared with your resources because pretty much I had been doing my own thing for a few years.
Mm-hmm.
So I got an email that just said good luck. And so I didn't realize how a few months into being in my own apartment, working, I didn't realize how lonely I was going to start feeling. Like to the point where I had gotten a 1-bedroom, but I had gotten so lonely that like a few months in, I transferred to a 2-bedroom to be able to get a roommate just because I was so lonely. Now, granted, that roommate now is one of my best friends, but it was someone I met on eroommate.com.
Wait, that's a thing? I didn't know about
It
that.
is. It's a thing. It's legit. Like you have to pay for it to find a roommate, to be able to like vet people. And I vetted a few people. But I was so lonely. And it wasn't just, and I had people, it's just that I was still in this like, are you really going to be there for me though when I need you? Like now that Defects is not covering a per diem for me to stay somewhere, if I need you and I hit a rut, will you be there for me? Are you going to, and most people didn't understand. Sorry. Most people, I feel like somebody's trying to get in my house, but most people didn't understand. Didn't understand that. They didn't understand where I was mentally. And I think that they expected me to just maintain this mentality that I had been living off of like suppressing everything. And I'm good. Not that they knew I was suppressing. It was more of like, well, she's doing pretty good. She seems okay. So she should be pretty good, They didn't, I think they just expected that to continue. And then I think once my eyes were open and I realized, I went through a phase where like I quit a job because like, oh, I'm not happy here. But I quit a job without a job. And but rent's still there. You can't like quit a job.
Yeah.
Rent is still there. And so at that point there were certain people in my life that showed up. And not that it's funny because it's like, it's not that I was intentionally challenging you or testing you. But it was more of like, yeah, will you be there for me? Because I'm still a kid, like I'm still young, I still need guidance. Mm-hmm. Right now, the system expected that I was great. I was ready to move on as a full-grown adult, ready to make these important decisions. And it's funny because I know somebody on is watching that is one of those people that has been in my life since I was like 18, 19. And at that time, I challenged her a couple of times. I didn't know at the time that I was challenging her, but knowing my mentality, at the time I recognized that I was. And she was there for me. She showed up every time and still to this day.
That is amazing. Yeah, I normally bring that person on. I want to hear
that person get on, but I see that she's on. I see you, Sherry.
Yeah, I'm just thinking like so with all of that, I think Joseph asked this earlier, like, so where are you, I guess, with that healing process currently?
I am honestly, I'm at a pause. Meaning confronting and addressing certain things started to take a toll on me emotionally. Mm-hmm. And so I made a conscious decision to take a break. So I can't tell you like, are you in the middle, the end, the beginning still? Couldn't tell you that. I just know that it got heavy, and I've had to take a break. I still communicate with my therapist. I still, the things that I did learn, I think, so one of the things I will say that has been helpful, and even in me taking a break, is that I learned from my therapist how to, as we started my healing, addressing some of the trauma. So, and I guess I can say this just for informational purposes, I am working with a therapist that specializes in EMDR treatment. I don't know what each one of those things stand for.
I was going to ask. I've never heard of it.
But it is a treatment focused on helping to essentially reprocess, to like confront your trauma and reprocess your brain, to be able to heal from it, so that, talking about those things or knowing, your story doesn't rehash certain feelings. Like, for instance, which is how I've been able to really do this interview, is there are times where I didn't talk about my story at all because it seemed so surreal that it felt so real still, right? Like I was still going through those things. And so what this treatment is supposed to help you do is so I started off with like having to create this timeline in chronological order of things that I could think of that I felt had an impact. I don't want to say were traumatizing because you don't always realize what could be traumatizing to you, but had an impact, right? Mm-hmm. And I got started, didn't even finish the whole thing, but I got started. And so what we did was start at the very beginning. And she would teach me that there's some things that we may not be able to, we may start to talk about, but we may not be able to dive into because it's connected to something else. Mm-hmm. And so we have to get further along in the timeline to be able to address and correct and fix, right? It's a powerful, EMDR therapy, it's a powerful tool.
So,
go ahead.
EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing is psychotherapy that enables people to heal from the symptoms and emotional distress that are the result of disturbing life experiences. And so it puts the brain through its paces to try and, speed up the kind of psychological healing process.
Yeah, thank you for that. So even though it says there are different ways to do it, to approach it. So some of it is like eye stuff, and some of it like the practice that my therapist uses is like this. It's all sensory, so it's a sensory touch thing, and so it's like these two things that I hold, and it vibrates or does some sort of movement in your hand or whatever. But anyways, getting too deep into it, it's powerful. Like, and I don't think I have heard too many people or enough people talk about it, but it works. And so essentially I started working on certain things. And it got to be too much. There are things that I didn't even realize, because my trauma, addressing it, what it would do was ignite my anxiety, or I have anxiety attacks and I get it's not good. And so because of it, you got to take it one step at a time. You got to take it slow. And so anyways, getting back on track, I am at a place where I can identify when I start to feel a certain way because of something that has happened. I am at a place where I am starting to be able to, like in my current state of mind or stage of life that I'm in, I'm starting to be able to answer certain questions about myself, like whether it's relationships, why do I approach certain relationships the way I do, or answering certain questions that I didn't realize, or recognizing that, to be honest, I have some daddy issues, even though I never I never put any of the blame on my father for so long. it was like I started to recognize like why, even though he didn't seem really relevant, why his lack of fight for me has been so relevant in the way I build relationships. Does that make sense? So I am at that stage. Go ahead.
No, I get it. I was fortunate enough to have that conversation with my biological father. That was a deep conversation. He actually came up and it's like, just let it all out. Let me know what you have to say to me or whatever. And we had a great talk about that. For nothing, this is not my interview. This is your interview.
No, that's good. Like a real live version of like, when people say write the letter, but don't send it to them and just burn it or something. Like a real life version of that. For the record, I don't like that type of technique, but whatever. To each its own. But yeah, that's where I'm at. I'm at this stage of being able to recognize, and I think I have a long way to go. But in the 2 years intermittently that I have gone to therapy and specifically focused in on this specific practice, it has changed a lot, addressed a lot, helped me to understand so much. And it, I think it's helped me to be a better mom. Like I'm not, I think that in order to refrain from repeating the same things with your children, one of the first, you've got to address your own issues. As I stated at the very beginning, I think that was one of the issues with my mom. This wasn't a conversation that people had. Mental health was only reserved for the really crazy people in the psycho house conversations.
Yes.
We didn't talk about everybody in our life potentially having some need for therapy or some need to process something. And you gotta, like, when you think about it, think about how everybody in your life now, excuse me, in your life now, was at some point a part of that, like older people, was at some point a part of that life where we weren't talking about mental health, right? So their parents and then their parents and their parents, so on and so forth, where, so at some point everyone could benefit off of therapy and working through stuff or working through the way, you could have had the best parents, but there are some things that I've had conversations with people about that it's like, I think trauma exists in many forms. And one of the things can be unintentional trauma. It's just kind of the way that their parents experience things. So then they bring it back over here. It didn't hurt me. I'm not dead. So yeah, so I'm at that stage of understanding mine, and in the process, beginning to have conversation with other people, and bring it up as if it's a normal thing to talk about. I think it's become more prevalent now, especially after COVID, after a year of a pandemic. And I don't know if y'all noticed, but mental health has become like the topic of conversation these days, because all of a sudden we were in this pandemic and people had to stay in their house all day, and now we realize like, whoo,
my partner crazy.
Right. Now we're like, oh Jesus.
Yeah.
So, or we had time to be in our thoughts. And so we were like, oh Lord, where does that come from? So, I'm there, and I enjoy talking about it. I enjoy learning more and being able to teach, and even in my own work, being able to like still having a lot of work to do on myself. I've done enough to be able to talk about it and talk about the importance of the work, doing the work. And yeah, I guess that's where I'm at now. Sounds like a good place.
Yeah, that sounds like an amazing place. So, so what, I guess you mentioned it briefly in the beginning. What are you doing now? Like where is amazing Mia now, or marvelous Mia? Yeah, marvelous.
Marvelous, Mia. So what am I doing as far as work? That's what you're asking, or what am I?
In general, work, school, things like that.
I am, so I work. I haven't hit it big yet, hadn't hit the lottery. So I work for Mac. My I don't do direct service work. It's not my have intentionally avoided it. It's not anywhere I want to be close to, but I'm still involved in the work, obviously doing the advocacy work. But technically, like day to day, I work in IT. So I'm a database manager. I built that skill, having gone to Year Up and doing an internship at a corporate company and then getting hired onto that company. So it's something I love it. I think people associate IT only with like desktop support, and I'm good at it, but that's not what I do. I'm just in the world of technology, and it's ever evolving. So when I always have a job, get into technology in some way.
Definitely.
That's my plug. But no, I'm a mom. I have a 4-year-old. One day I do want more kids. But right now I have my 4-year-old and she's a handful. She's brilliant. She's beautiful. She's a handful. She's very much like me. Maybe that's why she is a handful. But I think one of my callings is to be a mother and to provide love and safety and protection in a way that I never had myself in that form. I got back in school for the first time in 2018. I have been on a break since the pandemic hit. I'm not a on the computer school person.
Right. Yeah.
So I did take a break. So hopefully I intend on going back in the fall, but I am at Georgia State. Juggling a lot, but I'm in a pretty good place right now. Just trying to figure out what my next step is. I think my passion is storytelling. It's, if you can't tell,
Yeah.
it's providing a safe space, not just youth and foster care, but everybody has a story, right? And I feel like there are so many platforms of celebrities and people that have gone viral, and they tend to, you try to relate to everyday people, right? Whether it's mental health or it's day to day or it's career or it's parenting, and as much as we try to relate and make celebrities relatable to everyday people, the resources are not the same. And so
Right.
it's quite the same. Even in mental health, like in the mental health world, it's great that a lot of celebrities have been coming out and expressing their experiences with mental health, but even then the resources that you have to certain places and healthcare
Right.
is a little different. And so it is my desire to eventually step into my passion and what I believe now to be my purpose, to help just everyday people share their story in different ways, different creative ways. I know what it's like to feel silenced and feel like no one's going to care. But I think that everyone has something to say. And even though it might not benefit or affect or provide a resource for everybody, somebody can take something, and so that is my focus as far as like what I'm trying to work towards, is building a platform for that and being able to give a safe space and a authentic space for just everyday people to share their story.
That is amazing.
Doing this A word, amazing.
I can't help it. I don't know. I'm still going back and thinking about where you come from to how you are now or whatever. I mean, you quite literally was a Harry Potter, like like sleeping up.
Yeah.
It's like being in the room or whatever. I don't know. And then to being
He said quite literally.
I don't know. Like I don't know. I said it earlier. Like, it's all about making sure that we have the right people for the
Yeah.
for the job. Like not everybody is cut from this cloth, and I just feel like if you yourself haven't healed, then you shouldn't be taking on certain responsibilities.
Yeah, I mean, but I think it's also teaching, I agree. But you know, you can't really gauge where everybody is in their healing.
True.
And so you can't, it can't really be completely focused on that. I think it's the resources provided to the people that are working to be able to provide and support this community, this demographic, the youth in foster care. Because I think that we, on the topic of talking about like trauma and everybody, it becoming more of a conversation now and the stigma trying to be broken. Um, you know, I think a lot of child welfare agencies are really big on this, like being trauma informed idea, which is great. It's needed. But then like when you're informed, what do you do with it? And so there's this need for like training on being trauma responsive and how to get to step two after you've been trained on step one, which is the information behind it. And so I think it's continuous, it's continuously progressing, right? And I think we just take a long time as a society to get to step two. And so we work off of step one for a very long time, just working in circles, right? And so I think that's what, like, that is what could potentially, that's what helps us to be better in this work, is having all the resources, not just one out of the five, not just two out of the five, but all of them, if that makes any sense. And I think more people should start picking up on this, teaching the trauma informed information, but teaching the trauma responsive information and bringing in more people like all of us, you know, that have the experience directly and are wanting to share our knowledge, to be a part of, to be at the table, you know, to be a part of those discussions more and not just not just a good look for, we have alumni of care working for us, you know?
Yeah. All right. Well, I don't know. I think that's so. I guess my final question would be for any young person that happens to watch this or what have you, like what advice would you give them, or you can do both, or for a staff, a case manager, a psychiatrist, a group home parent, or what have you, like what is some good advice that they should take with them to their job starting right now?
So as far as advice to a young person, what kind of advice? Like just how to keep going? I don't, yeah, what kind of advice do you like, or just anything?
Yeah. So if for a younger you, like if you go back and talk to a younger you, like what type of advice would you give you?
um
Sorry, I hit you with that deep one.
yeah, look, I'm staring off. You know, you know, I don't know. I am so like, I don't know, like everybody's path, everybody's journey is different. And so I can say like, just keep going, or like, I don't have anything specific. I don't know. Like, even if I could say it to my younger self, like, I think that I made it the best way I knew how. And I just kept going. And because I wouldn't sit here and say like, focus in on your mental health and your trauma, because I don't think I would have been able to handle it at that stage, you know?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I guess if I had to say something, it would be don't be afraid to reach out for help, or like not even just asking for help for like a resource or something, but don't be afraid to express that like you need someone. I need someone. I need someone here for me. you know?
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like that's it. Because I don't think any one person can make it without anybody.
Right.
And you can have all the resources in your back pocket, but there's still this human desire to feel like you belong. And so being more expressive about, I need somebody. I can't do this on my own. And you know what? I'd have to honestly say your story matters. Don't ever let anybody convince you of like, um, nobody's going to want to hear that. Nobody's going to care, which is why it's taken me so long to begin to talk about it. Is because I heard that all. Nobody's going to care. You're going to get older. You're going to work, get in a job. People don't care. And that works. That makes sense to an extent. But saying it that broadly just really is very invalidating. And being silenced is probably one of the worst feelings ever. Like feeling like you don't have a voice and cannot share your story is one of the most invalidating and feelings of unimportance and worthlessness out there, I think. So do not ever let anybody silence you. As much as you may hear it, as much as you may hear someone say, like, forgive and forget, move on, keep living your life. Your story is your story. And your story may be the reason why you keep going. You know? Now to adults, to the staff in this field. Honestly, it would have to be that like you cannot work in this field with the idea that there is this off and on switch emotionally. Like there obviously needs to be a work-life balance boundary. There obviously needs to be this boundary between, you know, being able to get the work done and taking care of your own emotional state and self-care and all that great stuff. But there is no off and on switch. And getting into this line of work, you've got to be like, you have to be prepared for it. Like it's not for the weak of heart at all, you know. Just because the stories that you may hear are draining to you, it doesn't mean it doesn't it is not it's still not okay to invalidate a youth. It is still not okay to say, I don't want to hear it because it's just too much for me. None of that is okay. And learning to honestly sit down with a kid and ask what happened is probably the most is probably the best way to connect with a young person. And it is okay to not have all the answers. It is okay to admit that I don't know, but what do you need from me? What can I give you right now in this moment? And even if it's not realistic, even if it's like you get that kid that just says, I just want a family, I just want to be back with my family, and you can't do that. Simply asking and allowing them to acknowledge what it is they need can be so impactful. And it honestly can help with the idea of opening up the mind of a young person and knowing that connection with somebody is okay. Emotional connection with somebody is okay. Somebody does care. So asking what happened and being able to put your own stuff aside, because the truth is you got into this line of work and this is what comes with it. I don't know, that may have sounded really harsh.
Oh, I'm all for it. I'm all for it.
That is the question of the season. What happened? Stop asking people, what did you do? Or what's wrong with you? What happened?
Yeah, and I don't think that I've asked that question enough either. Like the what happened. Um, I do try and make it a point not to, like, especially when I go out to meet young people and talk with them, um, not to look at their case files because I don't want to be jaded by somebody else's views.
Yeah.
Unless and I'll ask a coworker, I'm like, hey, is there something specific that I need to know? Like, have they been sexually traumatized or whatever? And I'm a
Yeah.
male going up in there. That's a whole different thing. But outside of that, I'll probably take that file with me, and then we could read it together. Or you could tell me what's going on, and then we could read it together, and you can tell me what's wrong with this case file or whatever. But
Yeah. And even if you do read the case file, being able to, differentiate between, okay, I read the file, but now let me talk to,
mhm,
you
yeah,
know.
exactly.
Yeah,
Emotional
I've had a
roller.
good time.
Huh?
How are you feeling? You okay?
No, I'm good. I'm good. I'm good. I'm good. I'm just listening and absorbing or
Yeah.
whatever. I feel that each time I do one of these, it gives me something new to make sure that I'm doing,
Hmm.
um, and make sure that I'm asking. And so I hope that for people that watch these and listen to these, that that they don't take, like you said, you got to have a thick skin, like you don't take it
Hmm.
personal, like this is because I'm not, I'm looking at this from a social worker point of view, like there's some things that I should be doing differently too, or doing better or whatever. And so every time I listen to something or listen to the person that I'm interviewing, I was like, man, I could have done that so much better. Like I'm thinking down the line or what have you. But as
We
we
all
there,
have room to grow.
huh?
So we all have room to grow.
Yeah. But thank you, Mia.
Thank you. Thank y'all for having me.
Yes, thank you. I really appreciate you for joining on. And just FYI, this is Mia's second time on here. The first time she came on, we did the relationships.
Oh yeah.
That was a separate one. So if you have not seen that one, that was a whole interesting conversation. I still gotta go back in and chop that one up. But that was on our YouTube, and it's not on our Spotify yet. But that one was a good conversation. Learning about relationships. I should have reviewed that one and asked you some follow-up questions.
Yeah. Maybe another time.
Yeah.
When are we gonna get the dude advice?
The
The
what?
sit down. The sit down for dudes.
Yeah. Oh yes. Yes, we need to do that. Yeah, we need to go ahead and put that together. Yeah, that
Yeah.
that is a definite. Because
Yeah, I
I
need to have a female lead that conversation.
say what?
Yeah, I need to have a female lead that conversation.
With
It
your
was only
host,
fair. It
Mia
was only
Calvo.
fair. Are you
Oh,
are you
look,
The hard hitting questions.
are you volunteering, Mia?
look, I will.
Okay.
Now don't try to get out of it now that you know you know how I can be.
Listen, I don't mind. I don't mind being grilled. It's only fair since I ask questions all the time or whatever.
Yeah.
So, but again, thank you. We really from the bottom of my heart, like really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story, sharing your experience. Um, and if you need me, I'm right down the hall. So, Joseph, do you have anything that's going on that you want to make sure the good people know about?
Sure. For our members, it's always good to reach out if you have any health related needs or concerns or questions. For those of our Georgia Families 360 folks, just go to myamericgroup.com/GA for more information. We want to hear from you.
Mhm. And for those of you who are on and will be listening, you should be receiving emails from me. We're doing an entrepreneurship one-on-one workshop at the end of August. Where we are doing youth town halls, and empowerment is getting into the bid of a fundraiser. So we have to raise $6,000, and we'll be entered into a chance to win $200,000. So please help us with that, and it can't come from a corporate thing. Like it has to be an actual people, like the community has to be in on it, which I think is a great thing. Like
Yeah.
everybody could get money from corporate people, but like for your community to want to give to you, that would be great. So if you can help it, once you see the announcements, please pass it out. We're trying to there's a lot of things that we could do for our brothers and sisters in care with 200,000 or whatever.
Hey.
Yeah, we can't all be as fortunate as Joseph, but but definitely thank you all for joining. Really appreciate you, Mia, and I always thank you for helping to co-host Joseph.
My pleasure.
Everybody stay safe.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
All right.
Right.
Bye.